You said you try to focus on your work and not the impact of your work. What does that mean?
Well, one of the main questions I always get asked is, what is the purpose of Humans of New York? You know, what is the meaning of it? And I think people try to put it into a box of showing the commonality of humanity, showing that we're all looking for happiness, and assign these very sweeping, grandiose themes to it. And what I always say is that, you know, my purpose in Humans of New York is not to tell the story of humanity. It's to tell the story of the person right in front of me. Because if I go into that conversation trying to show that all of us are loving, or that world peace is the answer, or that we're all looking for happiness, then I don't think I'm truly listening to that person. So, you know, no matter how philanthropic the motive is, I try, and you know, it's a try, it's all an effort. You know, I fall short, of course, but I try to go in with as blank of a slate as possible and just let that person dictate to me who they are, as opposed to asking questions geared at finding out how they relate to everybody else.
So what's the trick to get people to tell you what are, in the end, some of the most intimate and personal stories?
Well, I mean, the first, easiest question to ask, but it's so much about energy. And this is something that I had to earn over stopping 10,000 people on the street, is that there's such a small difference between the energy of an interview and a conversation. But there is a world of difference in the replies that you get. And so, you know, after approaching 10,000 people, what I'm able to do is I'm able to be present. I don't have any questions in my mind that I'm going to ask, and I'm just able to listen and be there and listen. And every single one of my questions is based on something that they're telling me, as opposed to something that I thought of. And I always say that, as you said, you know, some of the things that they talk about, very personal. Their divorces, their affairs, their addictions, things they haven't told anybody, but they're sharing it with me. And I always say that I think there's two threads running through the mind of every person that I interview about something very personal. One is this fear of being exposed and this feeling of being vulnerable, and the other is the feeling of being validated and having somebody care about your story. Because in New York City, there are people walking around with no money, no family, and a drug addiction. All they have is their story. It's the only thing of value that they're carrying around. But it takes somebody else to validate it. It takes somebody else to care about it and wonder about it for it to really have value. And I think that process of having somebody there just so interested and so curious about not only what you went through, but what you learned from it, which just encourages people to share.
And so then is it a common response to you then in the end, a sense of gratitude because they have that thing they want to share?
Both sides. The best interviews, the ones I feel the best about, are the ones where at the end we're profusely thanking each other. Me for thanking them for telling me this amazing story about their lives, and them thanking me for listening.
4 years ago, you were eating cat food, somebody said.
That's what I say.
Yeah. It's a metaphorical.
Right.
Now you're the author of 2 best-selling books. What would you tell? You took a big risk, a big leap.
Right.
What would you tell someone else who's got that kind of?
Right. You know, what I always say is, because remember, you asked me where Humans of New York came from, and the answer wasn't a flash of inspiration. The answer was I wanted to photograph. I got out there, I did it every day, and I evolved it tiny little steps at a time until it became what later was successful, which was a storytelling blog. And what I always say to younger people is, if I had waited for the idea for Humans of New York, I would have never begun Humans of New York. I started with wanting to do something that I loved and started working at it as if it was my job before I knew exactly what it was going to be. And so I always tell people that you have to trust that if you really want to do something, you have to go at it 100% and trust that you're going to become who you need to be, and the idea is going to become what it needs to be on the way, because you cannot wait for a perfect idea. It will never happen.